Thank you for tuning in to Koppen Comic. I'm Brian Koppen with comic Keith Bramer. Keith Bramer, how the hell are you?
I'm doing all right.
Oh, all right. Well, I mean, I've seen your face 4,000 times because you just are producing every show every night of the week. So we're going to get into that. But real quick, I follow you everywhere. You are Keith D. Graver on both Instagram and Twitter. Of course,
The
your
tweets. Yep.
your current handle is I've never had pink eye. So if you've typed that into Twitter, you might find it just as easily as Keith D. Graver. But also you have a YouTube channel that is linked from your Linktree. And on Linktree, you are Keith Graver. And I think one of your podcasts is Everybody's a Comedian. And I think recently you had on Sue on Weaver. So tell me about the podcast first.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to clarify. I realize it's a little bit of a humble brag, but it's true. I've never had pink eye. So I just want to throw it out there. Ladies, I'm married. I'm sorry. It's a great catch, but
Ladies, you could come lick my eyeball.
I'm off
but
the
I'm married.
market. Yeah. Weird flex, but yeah, my podcast is a really fun project. So I take a couple of comedians that I'm friends with who share some sort of connection, and I just talk about that connection. So whether it be I've had on siblings, I've had on people, comics who are producers, and we talk about producing. I've had on comics who, are Black comics in the industry, and we talk about race and their experience, whether that's different than what other comics experience.
Yeah, I was about to say your connection there is that you're also a Black person.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm 12% Mexican.
Okay.
I think like 40% Lithuanian. I don't know. The 23andMe just keeps changing. I really just looked up 23andMe to find out who I should blame my baldness on. That was my main game. No, but I do want to the podcast does kind of go from, soft issues to like harder issues. And I do want to sort of I'm not Geraldo in the 80s, but I do want to investigate a little bit into other people's lives and what people experience in the world of comedy, because, you see that all the time. You see like different posts and stuff like, oh, this person did this. And, I'm like, really? So I want to know firsthand. I want to get in there and get into people's minds and, experience things that I'm not necessarily privy to.
So like Sue on Weaver, when she was on, what did you kind of talk to her about as far as serious topics, or was it just your connection as a producer of comedy shows?
Well, she was on with Mary Bakay, and they were at that time producing partners. And
since then, that was 8 months ago, they since had a falling out.
Well, no, they went in different directions for creative differences, okay, which is fine. And that's part of the game with being a producer. It's, I have a partner myself. We do Lyra Comedy, and I love, it's Ed Rosegen is my partner. I love working with him. He's great. But the thing is, with partnerships, you have to realize that partnerships are about all the things that you agree with.
Yeah.
The things you have in common, the things you both agree on. Everything else is the solo album, and that's fine. You can have the solo albums and still have the partnership. And we're still maintaining that.
And that's why you could start up 10 more shows with 10 different partners, right?
Sure. And I have my solo albums, and I encourage his. And I think everyone should always be, free to create, and then free to make alliances and collaborate. I think that's all. There's room for all that stuff.
Well, I mean, tell me about Lyra Comedy, because I see you've had on not only Sue on Weaver, but C.T. Adams, but also Michael Virgilio. So how are you just kind of snagging this, and what's the through line? What's the consistency as far as the kind of comics you're bringing on to Lyra Comedy?
So Lyra Comedy, honestly, it started out of, the pandemic. Can't get out to do shows, Zoom shows. Look, Zoom shows aren't great. But it's one of those things that it just helps you stay active. It's like doing push-ups in prison or something,
which you have no firsthand experience of.
No, I can't attest to, but I imagine I've seen certain videos and shows and movies. But we were doing push-ups in prison on Zoom, doing our comedy reps. And
Yeah.
what happened was we ended up, I sort of just went around cherry picking talent to say, hey, come do this mic with us. It was not an open mic. And we did shows as well. It was sort of a underground, speakeasy mic. Like, hey, if you're invited, it's an invite only mic.
Wow.
And so we just started finding people that we liked and people that were nice to be around and that were talented and funny. And we got extremely lucky. We found an entire pool of talent that was just amazing. And we still have connections with all those people today. And we just did a mic the other night in not a great venue. I won't name names, but mics are mics. They're everywhere now. I saw Mike post it the other day. It was in a treehouse up a rope ladder. So good luck.
I think Michael Regilio was talking about, isn't there a mic behind an AutoZone or something?
Probably.
He's like, that's the only one I haven't gotten to, but now he has fear of missing out. Oh man.
Yeah. It might be in the break room of the AutoZone for all we know.
You're making great connections because I see like this, on your Instagram feed for Keith D. Graber, I see this crazy woke Asians things, not only with Suvan Weaver, but also Sonia Vai. And so she's a New Yorker. So yeah, I see this crazy woke Asians, like, what's the comedy connection there? Because it's a festival too. It's not only just a show.
Well, Crazy Woke Asians is run by it's Kiki Funny Mama on the gram. You can find her.
I think I remember that name. Yeah.
Yeah,
what's a great show. What's the show? Rich Asians.
Well, it's like a festival. They do shows, and they had a festival, and I was there at the festival to support because I had a lot of friends that were in there, not Asian, but I'm an Asian ally, I guess.
Okay. The 23andMe just keeps getting stranger.
Yeah, it just gets deeper and deeper.
Crazy Rich Asians. That's the show. Yeah. So Crazy Woke.
That's what I thought it was. That's why I went. I was like, maybe there's going to be free food. I don't know. But no, I had a lot of friends there and I went to support and I met new friends. See, that's the great thing about like when you go out and support shows. Yeah. And I'm going to do a PSA for supporting comedy shows here. But you make more connections and you make more friends. And, I sometimes I hear people complain about who are the bad seeds in comedy and who are the, people doing the things that you shouldn't be doing and blah, blah, blah. I like to ignore those people, find the best people and work with them. And that's
I don't want to hear it. Like somebody, I don't want somebody to poison the well because like, I'm not going to be willfully ignorant, but chances are I'm not going to ask Chris D'Elia to be on the podcast or Chris D'Elia, whatever the fuck his name is. So
yeah.
I never want to, I never talk to comedians about who they like and don't like. Cause it's like, let me form my own opinion when I speak to this person for the first time.
Sure. Yeah. And I've come up against some real doozies lately, but you know what? Bless them. I'm atheist, but fucking bless them. You know what I mean?
At least you don't have to produce a show with them. You're just
exactly.
Just person that I won't
let them loose.
With. Yeah.
It's like you find a raccoon in your yard. You don't have to capture it. You don't have to kill it. Just shoo it away, shoo it off the property, and then fill your hummingbird feeders and feed the squirrels and be happy.
That's a good point that I'd like to unpack a little bit, which is the raccoon thing. And the raccoon thing is great because it's like I think when you get older or kind of more experience in a certain profession, you learn that you don't have to swing at every pitch. Mm-hmm. You don't have to solve every problem today or whatever. And so kind of are you figuring that out when it comes to what mics to go to, what shows to produce, what venues to stay away from? Like I don't have to do everything all the time because your time is precious. And I think after a while you realize that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the process. And I don't even regret when I end up somewhere I don't love. It's an experience. It's the learning curve, and you just know and you move on. I mean, that's all of life. You learn and you move.
And have you learned that with material too? Like, what were you talking about earlier in your comedy career and what are you talking about now? And, what hard lessons have you learned along the way, as being a producer on your own shows and stuff like that, not only material, but the whole, production element of it. So not only stand up, but production. What have you learned along the way?
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing that the only actual lesson that I've learned is just to keep exploring, keep trying. There's so much. I'm still developing my voice, and there's so much material that I want to talk about. I kind of want to talk about everything there is to talk about on Earth. That's sort of my approach in my brain, which I know is not possible. And I'm one of those guys that's like, people, I'm sure you heard the expression, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
And I have those tendencies. But here's the thing. It's also possible to be a jack of no trades and a master of none. So I think I'm doing fine. You know what I mean? I think I'm like, I think that's an okay place to be.
But comedy is a connections game anyway. So even if you're like, yeah, I had a shitty set, or that was a shitty show, or a shitty venue, you're like, I met a couple of people that I will probably be adding to my show, or I'll be added to their show. And so it's like nothing is really wasted, is it?
No, and with material, I have lots of different material and types of jokes and topics that I go with. I try to just focus on offering my perspective, like the world filtered through Keith Graeber's eyes.
Yeah. So what's that worldview? So if I'm going to name 3 topics, and you're going to give me the worldview on it. You don't have to give me jokes. Okay. But like, does Keith Graeber have an insurrection joke, or does he keep it out of his act entirely because politics are too, divisive?
Oh no, I poke the bear. Keith Graeber has some insurrection jokes. First of all, if you look at a picture of me, I look like I could have been at the insurrection, but like selling some kind of street food. You know what I mean? Because I've got that ethnically ambiguous look, but I also, it's like, oh, that's a white guy, but it's an ethnically ambiguous white guy. I don't know.
People are so proud to have you in the audience because you're like, it's a little bit of color to him.
Yeah.
It's a cool looking white guy, but I mean, he might be a little ethnic. Let's just put him up front. Let's put him right behind Trump when he speaks, right?
I've probably got at least a couple minutes on the insurrection. But
and so from the point of view, not only of your look, but just like, are you poking fun at, are you saying, I mean, it's kind of, you have to avoid hack, but you probably are just like, that was ridiculous. Can you believe that happened? What is an interesting angle on it?
My angle usually is like, it's a silly thinker is usually my, like, it's a thinker, but it's a, it's a dumb comment on that kind of thing. If I think of an example that's stupid enough, I'll sling it at you.
Yeah, I think I asked the same thing about CT Adams, but he tries to stay away from, I don't know, whimsy or whatever. You're fine to go in the absurdist direction, and kind of where, how you get that way. Like, early on, where you're trying to talk about, dark shit in your life, and you kind of moved away from that, and you're like, that's not fun.
Oh, I like to hit the dark shit too. If it's mine, if it's, I don't want to, I think I wouldn't call it hack, but to hit dark shit that isn't yours is sometimes can be jarring to the audience, can be a little bit
callous. Like, can I laugh at this edgelord shit?
Yeah, exactly. Like suicide jokes are kind of in there maybe. But I also like, I have a fun suicide joke. I feel like you want to hear, I don't know.
I don't need to burn material, but just kind of, what is a hilarious angle on?
I was talking about my wife the other day. And I honestly, I love my wife. I'm one of those people who will like profess how much I love her because she's great, but I also use her and some of the interactions we have in my material, and because it's just silly and hilarious sometimes, but
and it's often touching on suicide.
And I have to sometimes remind the audience, I love my wife, and I was like, I would take a bullet for that woman, It would probably come out of my own gun, but
oh, that's great. That's just perfect. Yeah, how the fuck, how'd you stumble upon that one liner? And then how the hell are you making sure that A material is joined with only other A material? Because like when you have something that great, everything else can pale in comparison unless you really, you need to hustle to make sure all your other content is just as great, right?
Yeah. And you know what? Here's the thing in my brain, and this is how over analytical I am and how hard comedy is. In my brain, I'm already thinking to myself, oh, since the vaudeville days, there probably has to be at least 20 comedians who've said a similar joke.
Oh man,
it's hilarious.
I'm 44 and I haven't heard it yet. So that's
I'm 45. I haven't heard it yet.
There you go. That's something. Anybody else who is dead or is not at your comedy show, at least you're not hacking it. I mean, at least you didn't bite it.
And, comics, we sort of battle that all the time. And the way I think about it is David Lynch has a quote that's about, originality, that's sort of like, it's a little bit ambiguous. It's not a fine line. And I say that, whether you think somebody stole your material or you're worried that you're copying someone else's, you should know that there's 100 other people with the same idea right now. There's very rarely is it a specific idea that's original. What's original is how it fits into your persona, your personality, everything that you think, your whole philosophy on life. That's your presentation of it is the original part.
Yeah, at least don't let it scare you off. But I mean, I had somebody on who was talking about, I don't know, pandemic humor or something like that. And he's like, dude, I'm trying to avoid writing that shit because that somebody more famous is going to beat me to that on TV.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, no, I like it not scaring you off, and you just go hard on your material until somebody told you that it sounds similar, and then you're like, okay, I'll take it for my act. So I mean, it should never scare you off, but I really think that line is so good, and if somebody else beats it to it on TV, you're like, fuck, that was my gold, and you just took it, bro.
Yeah, and I think what non-comedians sometimes maybe don't understand that we go through is there is a difference between you having an original thought that someone also originally had themselves and somebody stealing from another person.
Yeah, it's just parallel thought, right?
Yeah, that difference isn't noticeable to the viewer, the audience. They may think, I heard it here first, so I heard from you second. Probably you stole it. Probably it's just low-hanging fruit, and everyone had that thought. I've actually mic'd with a comic who did a joke that I thought was not obvious and a little esoteric, and the whole premise. And I had it just written in a copybook somewhere. I hadn't even done it yet. And then I'm like, well, if I do it, I don't know. But basically we were talking about.
You avoided it. Okay.
Yeah, I avoid it. And that's if it really is so close that it's stealing, I'll give it away. I have way too many jokes to worry about, like that one, Yeah,
and it's just like Twitter. It's like everybody's got that first joke in the first 5 seconds. It's a big trending topic, and so you have to wait till the 4th or 5th or 6th joke.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Emily Maverick Shankman was talking about that. She's releasing, like, right now, a short comedy film, and it's related to the microdosing Twitter format thing, where normalize this, microdose this, blah blah blah. And I'm like, dude, I've seen 4,000. Like, I only have comedians in my Twitter feed. I've seen 4,000 microdosing jokes, and you're the first one to say that. And it's like, it's a good thing that she's putting her comedy short out now, because maybe that same thing can't be said in a couple months or whatever. So you really just have to, but that's where persona is, and like what's worth your time. And so if you were a person who writes about suicide all the time, hopefully not, because that's a little sad. But I mean, if you beat somebody else to it, that's just your joke, because it's so linked to your persona.
Yeah.
So that's why you got to make sure you find your forever found of Keith Graber. You have to be like, okay, what's the thing that I can write about all the time, and it will never be subject to parallel thought? And that's why edgelords are so fucked up. You're like, dude, are you really trying to mine the same 5 controversial topics for laughs? Like, why the fuck would you do that? There's probably 4,000 interesting things in your past or your present that you could be talking about that will never be accused of biting or parallel thought.
Yeah, and I think that particular type of comedy, they're trying to milk the what's the laughter trigger of discomfort or embarrassment. They're just trying to milk that laughter trigger, and it's fine to utilize all laughter triggers, but to not explore the others.
Yeah, that's sad. It's kind of sad for their development, but I think some of it might be forced by social media engagement. Mm-hmm. They're thinking, hey man, if I say the wrong thing at the right time on the right platform, I'll go viral and I'll be on Rogan tomorrow.
Yeah, and also they're probably encouraged by certain famous comics that actually make a living doing that. Like Anthony Jeselnik, I think is a great comic, but he's a great comic because of his delivery.
Yeah,
his laser delivery. The thoughts are funny. It's a developed premise, but a lot of times those jokes. I mean, I've seen him laser deliver a street joke, and it was excellent. It was funny, but that anyone else doing it is going to fall short probably.
Yeah.
So it's
I reached out to him early on, and this is so funny because like I was doing that kind of awful shit at open mics really early on, and I hated it. I mean, I hated it. I was like, you weren't getting the laughs you wanted to because New York comedians are like, yeah, you're gonna say that on stage, like for real, like you're gonna say that here, but I can't add you to my show because you can't say that in front of my audience. But like, I reached out to him. I was like, dude, I'd love to write for you, and he goes, writing is the funnest part for me, and I'm thinking, yeah, because on your way up, if you're saying that dark shit to audiences who are too woke or sensitive or whatever, you probably have shitty fucking responses. Like now he's doing, I mean, he gets to the point where now he's like, the audiences are his. They're coming to see him. They love his copy delivery. They love the fact that he can be like, that was, that was a great joke. You're all stupid. But it's like, even coming up, he must have been like, dude, I love writing these really smart things, but the audiences are too sensitive for it. Yeah. He's like, that's why writing is the part that's fun for me. I'm like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I give a lot of credit to comedians who have sort of a niche or a specific shtick that doesn't always get the laugh. That's not as easily consumable. And they're sticking to that, and they're sort of committing to the bit.
Adam Gable's that way, man, where sometimes you're like, it's like a one-liner and you really have to think about it. And then you find like, oh, it's fucking brilliant, and it's not, I mean, it's not always uniformly brilliant, uniformly hilarious, but Adam Gable's just fucking like, and I had him on the podcast and I didn't really understand, I didn't understand it until like I started retweeting all his funny stuff. And I'm like, dude, some of this stuff is just fucking brilliant. And it's almost like he's thinking, I can't just do the 6 jokes about microdosing and wait for the 7th one. I legitimately have to change the game entirely on every single topic. So it's like, either I have to avoid popular topics entirely, or I have to take them and just twist them like a motherfucker, in the same way, Jordan Peele or whatever the fuck his name is doing with horror movies. You just have to change the game almost if you're going to be that clever. And it's just hard to do. And it's just like, how many jokes can you get that perfect? I had Mike Kaplan on, and he's kind of the same way. You're like, how the fuck do you even think like this, weirdo?
That one-liner comics just automatically impress me because of the way that they're off book with their material. I am very much more of a conversational. I'm trying to be more conversational and less, have it be less of a recital of bits.
How come?
I just,
I feel it feels more natural. Like it feels more natural and stilted to go on stage with one-liners, right?
Yeah, my fire comes out. Like I get more enthused about it, and that's palpable to the crowd. And I've seen that happen. And I do want to say there's one one-liner comic that I work with all the time, Susan Ware. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's a 78-year-old, like. So her off stage, I mean, her normal personality, she's sweet as pie. On stage, she's a little bit, she's like a crab apple on stage, and she's a one-liner comic, and it's brilliant stuff. And she's just a master of like embracing the silence and letting you wait
have
for
to
it.
do that. Have you ever gotten comfortable doing that yourself?
It's for me, being conversational and I'm a little bit more when I'm fully engaged, I'm like a little bit more of a fun uncle vibe. I'm a little silly.
There's no silence with the fun uncle.
The silence can
fill up the silence, and that way it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
He's filling up silence with inappropriate shit.
Yeah, silence can be can break my momentum at times. I do embrace it when it's all about feeling when you're on stage. You have to kind of feel how engaged the audience is, give them the appropriate time to laugh. And then, and that's not always the same, even for the same joke, but with different audiences, it might be a different timing. Yeah. So I don't know. I have to always like adapt to that. And it's just like having a different conversation with 2 different people. You might speak at a faster pace or fill more gaps with a different person because that's the way they engage in your conversation.
I like that, a conversation with 2 different people. Each audience is its own person that you're having a conversation with.
Yeah,
like Norm Macdonald said that about, he doesn't like comics to come out and like, give yourself a round of applause, blah blah blah, because he thinks that it should be about the silence, because he's like, it's like a balloon or something. You're blowing up the balloon, and the silence will ultimately be broken or the
Yeah.
balloon burst with the biggest laugh ever if you don't break that tension. And it's
Mhm.
like, I mean, some of his jokes were that great, but I don't know that I don't know that silence you really have to deliver on that silence. It kind of
Mhm.
adds a pressure that you might not need.
Well, I mean, first of all, I want to say I agree with Norm, but specifically, one of the worst phrases I've ever heard is give it up for yourselves. I don't even know how I give it up for myself. Like, can I just keep it? It's like giving yourself a Christmas card. Like, why would you?
Well,
I'll
how do you
just,
do that when you're a host, you're a producer? I see on all these bills, you're producing, you're hosting, you're getting spots yourself. You might be spot trading. Like, how the fuck do you do it if you're hosting, and if you think applause is the enemy when you're a host? What the fuck do you do?
oh, not that applause is the enemy, just like I would never instruct the audience to give it up for themselves. I feel like that I've it's so silly. It's just I don't know.
I think that's part of it. I think it's kind of intentionally
Yeah.
stupid. It's
And
intentionally silly.
there's something else that I don't like is when you play a little bit too much of like, when they do the, oh, you could do better than that, give me a better
Yeah,
round of applause,
I hate you then. I hate
it's, yeah, I do less. I do
you.
less as an audience member. I'm like,
Go
this
fuck
isn't
yourself. I'm sitting
this
here with a
isn't a
giant
school
ego.
assembly, dude. Get out of here with that.
I mean, I'm sitting with a giant ego, and I've seen people on stage. It's like, dude, I can do that. I've done that. And anytime I see a comedy show, music show, whatever it is, like I'm thinking that. And it's like, do you get that way when you go to shows? I know you go to shows to kind of connect with people too, but you produce and you host and you have spots in so many shows that I would think that, I mean, you would just be a shitty audience member. I mean, I guess I'm not like that because when I used to go out to see musicians, I would also write music, nice music reviews about them. I would be kind of in any audience, I'm kind of so empathetic that I kind of will laugh at anything that's funny. I'll
Mhm.
applaud any attempt at a song or whatever. Like, how are you as an audience member? And do you learn anything? Do you learn
Oh
anything
yeah,
from being in the audience? What have you learned?
I got my head on a swivel all the time. I pay attention to everything comedy because I want to know what works, what doesn't. And I always say, I don't know if this is a phrase, but this is a Keithism, I guess.
Keith,
Um, a smart person learns from their own mistakes. A wise person learns from somebody else's. Um, so if I get to see someone bomb, I get to know why, I get this to at least dissect that and figure out if there's something to learn for myself. So I don't
so
have
what
to
have you
bomb
learned though?
to possibly, well, it all depends. I mean,
Right.
like I said, every audience is different, but I'm super engaged in shows. I do laugh. I do applaud if a joke is so good, but it didn't get the laugh it deserved. You know what I mean? Like you feel out, you're like, that joke is solid. Like I'll
Yeah.
applaud for that.
Yeah. But have you
Um,
ever done a hard pivot based on, I mean, not just based on being an audience, but more generally, like, has there been anything that you've experienced on stage or in life or as an audience member or whatever that made you do a hard pivot in your material? Like, have you ever been one way about comedy and then totally flipped the script on it and being like, that wasn't me at all? That was the wrong persona for Keith Graber?
I've had, yeah, it's because I do so much and because I am producing and hosting. I've had a couple situations where I'm like, I learned a hard lesson about what material works in what scenarios.
Uh,
And so, for instance, I had a couple shows a few months ago that were back to back. One, I headlined and had a really good set. I, I hesitate to ever say I killed because it's like people say that, and you're like, all right, okay,
I
but
killed Jerry. It was gold.
yeah, sit down. But I had a good set. The crowd loved it. It was a fun night. I headlined. I closed strong. I was very happy with that, and so was the producer and the crowd and everything. And I did like 15 minutes, and I did some dark material that was topical. It was fun. The crowd didn't mind it. They loved that. And then I did a show a couple days after that where I hosted and I opened, and I'm like, I'm just rolling on that momentum. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'll touch on some of that material. And I fucking ate it. I ate it so hard.
So why was it?
Uh, what's that?
Why was it? something in the room or something about like you
Yeah,
presumed that they were on your
different.
side before you got them on your side?
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a new conversation with a different person, and that person wasn't into the same thing as the other person. But also, there's more to it. I opened the conversation with stuff that I ended a conversation with, after we've had a
Uh,
couple drinks and a late night talk at a bar.
it's like
So
saying goodbye instead of hello. That's genius. That's brilliant. That's
yeah,
another Keithism. You
and
can't start a new conversation with somebody else with what you ended the prior
yeah,
conversation with somebody else on. That's amazing.
yeah.
Unless
You
it's the
remember
same
when we were
audience. That's
talking
great.
about Ronald McDonald's dick the other night?
And
It's like,
they're
whoa,
like,
whoa, whoa,
no, fucker.
my first drink hasn't arrived yet. You got to calm down.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I
And
like a
so,
conversational bit. That is so cool. It's like it's just a conversation. It's like I started a new conversation with a new person, as if I was continuing a conversation with an old person. That's so great, especially with the drinks. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you can't talk about your dick or your dink before somebody else gets their drink. That's
yeah. And
wonderful.
here's what was the worst part of it. I was hosting. So you can't leave. You can't just be like, oh, fuck. Listen, guys, I had to come back and be like, oh, we got off on the wrong foot. How do you?
Did you admit it? I mean, are you just like, I need to calm the fuck down, or like, do you
No,
break down that fourth wall? Do you do crowd work? What do you do when you're kind
I
of
didn't, no,
out of
I
luck?
didn't break the fourth wall. I just kind of adapted my energy to theirs. And I very slowly won them back. I did by the end of the night. It was a good night. And I like to host and be, I like to be that energy palate cleanser as a host, but not overstep not ham up the stage time. So
Yeah, because
you
that's
want
not
to
a palate
offer,
cleanser. That's not a palate cleanser if you're not just cleansing the palate. It's not like lemon
yeah,
sorbet plus a bunch of chocolate chunks in it or something,
you don't have time for a 2 minute bit, 20 seconds maximum, maybe throw in some quips, relate to that material, do a bit or something that is going to get a laugh if somebody bombed or didn't do well. Don't mess around with somebody that killed and let that energy ride. Just let that energy ride. Just be like, yeah, that was
Ah.
awesome. I
And that's
I
when you
enjoyed
say,
it
let's keep it
too.
going for the next guy, and then you just get the
Keep
fuck
that
off the stage.
energy going. Yeah.
Ah,
Don't tank that room with your dumb joke that's not as good as that guy's
ah,
closer.
that's wonderful. I mean,
So
just I mean, did you learn anything, with the Zoom mics and things like that? Was there a difference between comedians of different geographic areas?
I haven't noticed specifically because there's so many comedians that I talk to that are of different styles. So that's like an extra layer of um, you know, analytics that I haven't been able to decipher the difference
That's
between.
what I've yet to buy that premium Google Analytics package that allows me
Yeah,
to peel back the layer between geography, comedy style,
yeah.
open mic versus hosting versus featuring. That's wonderful.
But I'll tell you, I will tell you that I know that'll slap me right in the face if I travel and do shows live. I know that I'll come face to face with that difference
Okay.
in styles, comic styles, and I'm fine with that. I'm willing to learn that lesson as it comes too.
So when are you going to come out to New York and test the live waters?
Yeah, how would you describe the New York audience as compared to the LA audience?
No, yeah, no idea. I mean, I just know, like, speaking with both sets of comedians, I know that everybody's kind of. I mean, everybody's just got to. I love speaking with you guys because you all are so open, and I think part of it is because you just kind of are present and in the moment, and you're
Mhm.
not because you have to be because otherwise you're losing opportunities for comedy. But yeah, I've yet to see tons of shows in either context, but it's so fun. Like I think I've seen some New York comedians go out to LA and vice versa, and it's just so neat to see the cross pollination. But if you're anybody who's anybody in LA, you got to know Keith D. Graber, and guess what? He's never had pink eye.
Looking forward to my first time.
Oh yeah. But yeah, we follow him everywhere. He's Keith D. Graber on Twitter. Let's see, Instagram. Let's check it out because he's got all these shows with all these great comedians: C.T. Adams, Michael Regilio, Suan Weaver. But yeah, he's Keith D. Graber on Instagram as well. But he has a link tree where he is Keith Graber, and everybody's a comedian. How often are you releasing episodes, and what comedians you got coming up?
Okay, I was intending to do Everybody's Comedian monthly.
Okay.
I did at one episode, and I think that's when I got COVID, and and that I had, I guess, not long COVID, I had medium COVID.
Okay.
So I had like a month-long brain fog, and so I still have a shelved episode that needs to come out.
Yes. Who's on
I,
that?
I put a pin in it. That's a couple of friends of mine, Heather Rogue and Denise Winkleman.
Okay.
They're both trans women who are in comedy, and we've all roasted each other before.
Oh no.
And this was pre-Chappelle special too when we
Okay.
did this. And I did an episode to get their experience as trans women in the industry,
Good.
without knowing that the Chappelle special was going to come out, and basically everyone would put that on Twitter anyway. So, you know,
That's yeah,
and
it's just like parallel thought. It's so great. It's like, fuck, dude, I had something in the
yeah,
can that I had something in the can that Dave Chappelle, unintentionally fucked up.
yeah. And I can't, I really have to get that episode out because here's the thing. We've roasted each other before. I've done roast battles and like a tribute roast for one of these friends. And, it's not impossible to be able to roast each other as cis and trans comedians on stage without towing over the line. There's certain jokes and stuff that you can say that shows sort of a lack of empathy or actual, hostility. And that's not where roasting really comes from. Roasting
Yeah.
really comes from tribute and joke crafting and knowing somebody.
And I think like you probably succeed with the roasting for the same reason that Chappelle failed with the special, because it's like you can't resort to lazy stereotypes or just the entire spectrum of person's going to come after you, because it's like, dude, I can't believe you're trying to fit any of us in a car, which is what he did. The metaphorical car where there's gays and they're trans, and because I have one gay friend, I can paint with a broad brush about all of them. It's like, no, you can't. And I thought you learned that lesson when you were, people try to do the same thing about Black people. It's like you were the one educating us on that. So where the fuck did you go?
Totally. And I honestly, dude, I can't tell you how many times I've written roast jokes about Heather. I wrote probably about 20 on Denise. She destroyed me at the Comedy Store, and credit to her. She did well. My delivery was off that night, but I won't take anything away from her. She gave it to me.
I think Potter said something about that. She's like, dude, that because the whole Che Diaz thing came out where they had like a queer person on the Sex and the City reboot, and she was just so awful, so unfunny, so resorting to lazy stereotypes. And so the Sammy Potter person said, I've never seen a non-binary comedian live in New York City who wasn't 4,000 times funnier than that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh, I imagine they can fucking tear you a new asshole, but it's just like, I don't care if you're cis or trans. Everybody's got to stop roasting. Y'all are too mean. That's my position on the whole thing. But Keith Graber, we follow you everywhere. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun. It was good to talk to you for this long. If I can plug one more thing,
please do.
I would like to plug my new show. It's a solo project. It's called Fudge Factor. And
I hope there's fudge involved.
It's fudging it. It's where you fudge it. It's a riff improv comedy show.
Okay.
Where the audience submits the topics for the comedians, and then the audience gets to vote on their favorite performer of the show.
Okay, does somebody get a prize of sorts?
And they get a prize. It's always merch from the Fudge Factor merch store.
Yes, that's perfect.
So
what topics are you envisioning they're going to give? And so you have to do so it's not improv, it's almost improvisational stand-up where I have to riff on what the topic you submitted, right? Honest to God, there's no parameters. I tell the comics, look, you can sprinkle in your material. You can do crowd work. You can roast everything, the concept, the room. You could do callbacks on other comedians' material. That's stupid. You can roast somebody for a stupid topic. That's wonderful. But I think like somebody would get less of a positive vote if you kind of strayed from the brief. I was an argument guy where I did argument competitions in law school, and they would judge you in part on whether or not you were responsive to the question. They would know if you were just kind of taking canned material and trying to shoehorn it in as an answer. And I think the audience is going to see that too, if a comic strays from the brief. And the comics, a lot of the comics were honest on stage, and they would sometimes tell you that. It's all about threading the needle, and it's all about delivering like a quality performance, getting the highest entertainment value out of just riffing, which is the struggle. I mean, anyone can riff, and anyone can write a set. Well,
I mean, most comedians can write a set. Can you do both at real time and make it, comprehensive and funny and have a high entertainment value?
And why'd you do that? Because you thought that, like, did you want to flex your improvisational chops, or do you think just everybody would? Do you think that people getting out of their own head and improvising a bit is going to help everybody with their chops? It's going to unlock, big chunks of new material for not only you but your friend comedians.
Yeah, totally. I did it for completely selfish reasons because I enjoy doing improv comedy, and I enjoy it because it unlocks something in myself. It forces me to unleash the beast. When you have nothing, you have to force something. Like there's no material, so you got to be like, oh, and it helps me be enthusiastic, be creative, be in. There's two minds sometimes as a comedian. There's your offstage brain and your onstage brain. Your onstage brain is a little bit restricted. It's a little bit in this mode where here's my list of material, and it's hard for me to access everything else to be fully engaged with everybody because I'm so focused on this project.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be able to access both brains so I can be the best performer and be in the moment, do the crowd work, respond to heckles, respond to whatever, be completely immersed in that moment. And I think improv comedy helps unlock that in people, well, at least in myself. So that was my main motivation for starting this. If anybody wants to follow on the gram, it's at fudge.factor, common spelling. And we do shows once a month in LA. They're really fun. It's really like, if you like comedy that has a little bit of inside baseball going on, like all these guys know each other. And by the way, it's I say guys in the neutral sense. It's a very diverse lineup. I don't believe in the 12 dudes and one token anybody. I always have diverse lineups. I try to keep, give everybody an opportunity, only because that represents my lifestyle. That's, if I had a party, it would be a diverse group of people. It wouldn't.
If you invited everybody from your 23andMe lineage, it would start looking like the fudge dot factor, right? Do you have that in your link tree too? Keith Graber link tree?
Yeah, that's in my link tree.
Nice.
And then the ethnically ambiguous shows that I do, that's I produce. Those are on my main Instagram of Keith D. Graber. And you can see those, and those are by nature diverse. But really those shows are just a way for, there's a lot of people who have been asked the question repeatedly through their life. So what are you anyway? And they hear it exactly like that. They hear it worded exactly like that. And I've heard that 1,000 times. And this is the show for them. There's a lot of diversity that needs to be represented more in comedy. I agree with that. This specific show is for those people who have heard that question all the time. So what are you anyway?
So it's not just diverse, but it's also them talking about the answer to that question.
Yes. And sometimes it's not always somebody who is either mixed ethnicities, biracial. Sometimes it's people who just get confused for certain races, or who do have something in there and they don't represent that whatsoever because they barely even know it. I had somebody on, a comedian who was on my show, and I think she was like 25% Chinese, and you would never even know it. She just looked like a white Jewish comic, and I'm 12% Mexican, and people ask me if I'm Pakistani. It's just, it runs the gamut, and it's really exploring everything about race and sort of the perceptions of race and the various types of, whether it be ignorance or biases or anything like that involved with your experiences in life, and in comedy.
Dude, I expect nothing less than that. You promoting shows on here was super expected, because if you go to Keith D. Graber on Instagram, you see this dude producing a show on Monday, producing a show on Tuesday, hosting a show on Wednesday, have this great spot on this other show on Thursday. So Keith Graber, thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure. Great to be here.